Hi, everyone. My name is Johan De Lange.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicolene, Schoeman-Louw.
Hi everyone, I'm Robyn. We are attorneys at SchoemanLaw Inc. based in Cape Town, South Africa. Today we'll be introducing ourselves, and I will start off with Nicolene, if you don't mind. So Nicolene, starting a law firm is a significant undertaking. Can you share more about the motivations behind seizing the opportunity to establish SchoemanLaw Inc. and how the firm has evolved since starting?
Thanks, Robyn. Sure, now you're asking me to go back in my memory bank for over a decade. We'll be celebrating our 18th anniversary this year. So it's been a while. I think for me, I know people have different reasons for starting businesses, whether it's law firms or other businesses. And for many of us, it's not really an aspiration, it's a circumstance and our reaction to a circumstance. For me, though, I think it was part of the fiber for many reasons. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My mum was in the retail space, my father in the professional services industry. He's a civil engineer by profession. And both of them embarked on this journey fairly late in life. And I was witness to the hard work, the blood, sweat, and tears, and the grit that it took to establish these organizations. And I think for me, I decided that I wanted to do it when I was younger, when you have more energy and you've got fresh ideas and you can bring a different perspective, I think, to the organization. But of course, it also comes with major challenges the earlier we embark on this journey. So I'm not saying that it's everyone's cup of tea and that everyone should embark upon it at a young age, but that's really what happened to me. So I took the plunge early in my mid-20s, and today we are a firm, boutique-sized law firm. And I think what has really stood the test of time was the empathy, the fiber that we have to understand the journey that it takes and the sacrifice that it takes, particularly from a business legal point of view. So I think that's really set us up to really connect with our clients and to walk the walk and to talk the talk. In addition to that, for me, it was a big dream, and gets me up every single day till this day to create a platform and a space where all the practitioners that work in the firm, those that will join us in future, can really find their space to make their mark in the world, and for us to create a safe space towards really cultivating that kind of culture in our organization. And if I look back and we reflect upon the whole journey we've been on, for me, that's the one thing that really sets us apart, because I do believe it allows us as a team to really find our passion and to find how that adds value to the people who we serve and the mark that we make. So that's I think that's the best way in which I can summarize it, if I'm honest. I want to move over to Johan now. Johan, tell us a bit about yourself and what drove you to start a career in law.
That's a funny question, just because you'd have to understand the nature of my family and how we do things in my family. We're a family of debaters. So from a young age, my father would always sort of sit me and my sister down and force us to really give reasons to why we wanted to do things. Or if we did something wrong, we would have to almost defend ourselves as if it was a trial case. And that also comes from his history. His father was a magistrate. But for me, the passion really only started, I think, later in my school career, when I had to choose a university. I really struggled to understand or to come to a decision as to what I wanted to study, but that ignited the passion for the law for me, because I essentially wrote about our constitution and its transformative nature, and that really started my journey to want to learn more about the law and understand the philosophy behind it and the history of it. And I looked at our history and where we've come and where we're going and what the vision is for our country. And it really, I saw the law and a career in the law to only best serve that purpose, and would be a way that I could contribute towards it. So that's truly where it started for me and what has been my motivation throughout. I mean, end of the day, I do find it interesting and I enjoy helping people. And that for me will always motivate me to be better and to learn from my mistakes and to learn more about the law, to see how I can help more and where. But I think I'm also just going to hand it over to Robyn. So, you know, Robyn, the legal field is quite complex, and you can imagine that sometimes we have specific cases that has a huge influence on us. So is there any specific case that stands out to you that wasn't just a personal challenge, but also was a professional challenge for you, and that really gave you and shaped your perspective of the law?
No, definitely. I think it was a matter I took on as a candidate attorney, and it was a family law dispute between a mother and a son. And it was quite a hostile case. And I just remember thinking to myself, you know, you have to separate personal and professional. But that case really taught me that they're kind of intertwined. As much as you want to keep it personal and professional, they're also humans at the end of the day. And it's very complex. It's advocating for my client, but also seeing the human element around it and being someone who is empathetic and trying to make sure I communicate as well to my client. That was a case that really, to this day, I remember just the fundamentals of engaging with a client and remembering the legal complex instances of what came out of that matter. And then as well to just remember that they're also human at the end of the day. Clients are humans, and clients want an outcome that's good for them and an engagement that uplifts them as well. So that's a matter that really stood with me from article stage, and I try and incorporate that in all my engagements with my clients now. But
that's very true what you say there.
Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to hand it back to you, Johan, if you don't mind. The spotlight is back on you. Okay, so Johan, innovation is not something that's commonly associated with the legal field. How do you bring about innovation to your matters and to your approach?
You know, that question's, it's a bit of a complicated answer, because it's not necessarily that I mean, the law isn't stagnant. One, that's the first point. It's not stagnant. It does change and it gets interpreted, but it takes a very long time for that to actually happen. Because I mean, you know, it develops through the courts and through changes in legislation. But for us as attorneys, especially in this day and age, and with the advent of AI and all these tools that we have available to us, you know, and that's actually partly also the firm's approach is we need to use these technologies in order to assist us on our matters, to give us an edge above, you know, other attorneys who maybe are a bit more slow towards these technologies. And I think it's more of a mindset than it is truly sort of kind of just looking at something and being like, oh, I want to use this. It's more of thinking about how can I use this tool to better myself and better my clients' chances. And even sometimes it's how can I be more efficient? And then you use those tools to do it. So, I mean, end of the day, it's keeping basically your eyes out for anything that is out there that you can use, and having that mindset of you don't want to just do what everybody else does, but you want to, in a way, innovate the legal practice and innovate the way that you practice in it. Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, I think that's that's where it all comes. And most people have this mindset, especially this day and age, of looking at what's out there and trying to innovate not just yourself, but also your practice and your career, and using those tools that you have available to you. But I'm going to quickly hand it over to Nicolene. So Nicolene, your focus on being client-centric, ethical, tech-savvy, innovative, and an entrepreneurial law firm is quite a unique thing. And I feel like that kind of jumps off from the question that I just answered as well. But I'd just like to know from you, what drove you to shape the firm in this way? And how have these principles manifested in your day-to-day operations in the firm?
Yeah, I think if we turn back the hands of time and we just, take a step back to contextualize that when the firm was conceived conceptually, it was way before we were even discussing things like AI or automation or blockchain or any of these technologies that have become second nature in our conversations. And I think when I reflect back on it, it goes back to a principle that is less techie, if I could put it that way, because it's all about looking at not to challenge the status quo for the sake of being a rebel without a cause, but to challenge the status quo to saying, are we still on track to hero the person who's supposed to be the hero? The person who we are ultimately serving, our clients, the person who benefits from this legal matter that we are conducting, or maybe it's an indirect benefit of someone who we are not directly engaging with. In other words, to see what we do as something that has an impact, cause and effect. And it may have an impact on a broader spectrum than just the short term that we are seeing in front of us right now, and to see whether the way in which we are going about our day-to-day aligns with the main focus of saying, how are we making things, even if it's just marginally better than before we got here? So I think the mindset, it's really a mindset thing rather than a tech thing, because it feels to me that when we label something to be techie or tech focused, it seems fleeting. It seems, oh, it's the flavor of the month. It's almost like the fashion for the season, Next time it's something else. So I want to say that it's a mindset which gives it longevity, that we are looking for a way to make things better, to improve things, to take things forward. And I think that mindset leads you to thinking out of the box and thinking, this is the problem. How do I fix this? Sure, this is what other people have said. This is how we've always done it. But hey, can I maybe just think a bit bigger and look for ways? And of course, ethics has to be our guiding light in that journey. We can't say in the name of fixing something or improving something, we overstep another boundary. So I think from the ethical side, we have to not lose sight of that moral compass. And that really leads me into the question I would like to pass over to Robyn. I think people out there may have a very interesting perspective on what it means to be a lawyer. Maybe it's very glitz and glam and, all the things that Hollywood has made us believe practicing law is really about. But the reality is, at least once, probably more, but at least once in our career, we are faced with a really unnatural competition within ourselves. And that's really where the moral compass comes in. Often we find ourselves where we have to question our own values, our beliefs, our moral compass with the hand we've been dealt, maybe with competing values on the part of a client. How do we navigate this? And how have you navigated this?
That's a great question. I think we can all agree that ethical dilemmas are a significant part in the legal field. I think someone along their legal journey, whether it's in their early legal journey or late on in life, you will face an ethical dilemma. I know I have on several occasions. And, you know, pointing cases, the case that I mentioned earlier, where it was a family dispute, and my, you know, moral compass, it was questioned. And what I try to do in that situation, as I do in any circumstance that, you know, raises that the balancing beam of your moral compass and the facts you're given, what I try to do is, firstly, it takes me on a personal journey of, you know, remembering what it is that I stand for personally. But it also takes me back to university and why I started studying law. And it reminds me of those core values, and remembering that ethically you need to do what you do for the good of your client in a way that stands firm with your core values as well. So I think it takes you on a journey, definitely, and it's just something that I try and make sure to always remember, that go back to why you study law, go back to the reasons for you being an attorney, for at least for myself, because it's a lot of hard work that we put into to get to here where we're at. It's sacrifice, it's time away from family, friends, partners, kids. It's a lot that goes into it. And I think to just remember, that's at least how I remind myself why I am doing what I'm doing. But Nicolene, in terms of mentoring young legal practitioners and training the legal project managers, which are demonstrated to the commitment of growth and development of other individuals, what drives you to these mentoring roles specifically, and what do you find the most rewarding of that?
Yeah, I think that's a big question. And by the way, for the listeners, both Johan and Robyn are trained legal project managers in their own right. I think legal project management is a really helpful set of tools, because I think if we look at the differences in individuals, and the ethical compass for me goes back to that moral compass and back to our authentic selves, and remembering that younger version of ourselves, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, studying law with all these beautiful ideas that, as we practice for longer, seem to become somewhat dimmed. We need to reignite that and remember who we are authentically. And I think the legal project management, getting back to that, gives you a unique set of tools, both task-focused and human-focused, people-focused. All of us are different. All of us look at tasks and matters from a different perspective. Some of us will dig into it and say, okay, what do we have to do here? Some of us are doers, task people. Others will think, okay, but what is the experience going to be like? What is the emotional experience going to feel like? How do we keep everyone energy-wise? How do we keep everyone energized and excited and happy and, you know, focused? So the legal project management, I think, was a game changer for me when I was trained. Whenever I present a course, it's one of the things I can't help but saying every single time, because it really did change my life, honestly speaking. And I think it's a set of tools that has the power to change other people's lives. And it's a way in which we can be real, we can be practical. So when we talk about mentorship, I think we think of this wise old owl setting and, you know, younglings listening, you know, maybe it's a Star Wars scene with Yoda and all of that. But jokes aside, I think we think mentorship means you have to be super old and you need to have a lot to share in terms of things you've seen, or cases you've handled, or, you know, high profile cases. You know, you have to have like a CV backing it. I don't think so. I think mentoring starts with someone who is working on your small team and has not done a particular matter as is in front of you at that point in time before, and you can give a little bit of guidance or tips. Or maybe a colleague is just not having a great day and you sit up and you chat over a lunch or a coffee or something. So I think mentoring takes different forms. And I think each of us has the potential to be that mentor. And I think as legal professionals, it is a duty that we each have to, from the start of our career, throughout our career, and towards the end of our career, to make sure that we hand over the baton. And handing over the baton isn't like the 12-month plan, right? Starting because we are 64 years old and we're heading into retirement, or we quickly have to hand over the baton. I think handing it over throughout our career and passing over knowledge and passing over tips helps us grow together. So that's really what attracts me. It attracts me because it's not one person on a solo journey and someone else following, and at some point saying, okay, now I'm ready to give the baton to you. Okay, here it is. Okay, catch it, please. It's a much more transitional journey that we take. And that appeals to me because I think it keeps the person who's wanting to hand over the baton young. It keeps you relevant. It helps you stay in touch, because the fact is, we look at the data, the older we get, the more we've got our opinions and we've got our little routines, and it becomes harder to relate to others. So that's what attracts me to it. And that's why I would like to think that I encourage others to share constantly throughout the journey. And with that, I think communication. I laugh because communication is one of the things that can make or break our interactions with our clients, with our teams. So I'm going to pass this one to Johan. Tell me, in law, communication, I think, as with any other career, absolutely critical, but also our profession is seen as mystical and people don't understand us. And we have this thing called jargon, and plain language is a movement because we don't seem to be trained to be very good at it, if I can be frank. So what tips have you learned over good communication in all facets, whether it be client, in the courtroom? Share with us.
I think it's just and it's something I've actually learned throughout my articles and when I was studying as well, because even for me, sometimes it was difficult to understand. I mean, when a lecturer was explaining something for the first time, you sit there and you're like, it seems like this massive concept and you don't understand, and you have to go read about it and read all these different opinions about what they say it is. And you start to learn these skills of how to explain something in a way that anybody can understand. Because I think, and I'm sure Robyn will agree, when we went to university, plain language was a massive thing. It did everything we did, all the articles we wrote, every assignment we did had to be in plain language. We weren't allowed to use the legal jargon, and if we did, we had to substantiate it with a plain language definition. So it became a skill that I developed. But the one thing I've learned is, you're not doing your client any favors if they're not understanding what you're talking about. And some of the tips that I've learned is to constantly check with your client that they do understand. And if they don't, you can always clarify it by maybe giving an example or explaining it to them in a way that they can understand. But it becomes a little bit more difficult when you go to a courtroom, because there you can use the jargon. So you kind of have to make this mental shift every now and then. When you're talking to a client, you need to speak to them this way so that they can understand in their language and as they would understand, depending obviously on what field they're in. Or if you're in the courtroom, you're speaking to a presiding officer or another attorney. So then you need to speak to them on their level. They can understand the jargon. Therefore, you kind of cut down the explanation because we can just give a jargon to say and everybody understands exactly what it is. So yeah, communication is a skill, and I think it's developed over time, and you get better at it the more interaction you have with people and the more you have to explain things. And eventually, you start to, it becomes second nature, and then you just keep communicating about it. And every now and then you get a little curveball of a client who really doesn't understand, and you're like, actually, I don't know how else to explain it. But I think I'm going to hand over to Robyn, just because obviously communication can also be a challenge, and there are a lot of challenges in the legal field, especially as we evolve. So I just wanted to ask you, from your experience, how do you strike a balance between, adapting in this ever-changing landscape and then staying true to those principles that ultimately led you into this field?
I think for me, the changes in the legal field, I don't see it as something that's threatening. I see it as something that it's able to enhance you, and it helps you grow as a professional. You're able to reach clients in a different way, and that's by making use of the new cases that have come up, or new changes to court rules. Anything that's really, you're able to give new solutions to something that you probably wouldn't have been able to maybe a year or two ago. So I think the changes are great. I embrace the changes. It's a reminder that you're able to actually help someone, because that's the core of what we do. It's to help an individual or a company, or however you want to phrase it. But to use that as a tool to just enhance the experience, rather than to see it as something of, oh my goodness, something else that has changed. That's how I see the changes in the legal field, and that's always helping me remember why I'm doing what I do, to just really enhance the experience. So that's all from my side. But I think we're going to wrap it up on that point. And I just wanted to thank everyone for listening to our very first podcast. Please like and share and comment in the box below. And should you have any suggestions for our podcast moving forward, please put it in the box below. We're open to any improvements. We take constructive criticism very well. And we will make sure that in our next episode, we will be talking about online content and what happens when you go a little bit beyond the legal boundary, and what happens when
Now, I think in our next episode, we will be looking at when the online content exceeds the boundary to the extent maybe even of being classified as bullying, and what we understand around it. I think it's widely misunderstood from our own experience. And yeah, we will be unpacking that. We'll also be looking at some other topics. And yeah, I echo what Robyn has said. We are open to any suggestions, any questions that you may have, any other topics that you want to suggest to us. So yeah, we're looking forward to discussing more of these topics and to hopefully see and meet some of you soon.